There is a silence no one prepares you for, not the silence of rooms or pauses in conversation, but a silence that blooms in the absence of identity. It arrives quietly, after the high, after the seeing, after the masks have fallen, and the scaffolding of your old life has vanished like a vapor. At first, awakening feels like being born into light. You feel infinite. You cry not because you're broken, but because joy itself has torn you open. The heart doesn't beat, it bursts. The stars no longer look distant. They breathe inside you. And in that radiant breath, you think, this is it. I've arrived. I've found the truth. But that was never the destination. It was only the threshold, an invitation, not a conclusion. What comes next isn't transcendence, it is descent. And here in the descent is where most people feel lost, confused, and hollow. Not because something went wrong, not because they weren't ready, but because the self they once clung to no longer exists, and nothing yet has risen to take its place. This is the emptiness, the great unspoken truth. Awakening doesn't fill you, it empties you. It strips every false layer so thoroughly that for a time, you no longer walk as a person, but as a ghost. Present but unanchored. You look in the mirror and see a face without a history, a body without a story. You do not recognize who you were. You cannot yet name who you are, and you are terrified to admit you have no idea who you are becoming. This is the in-between. The silent terrain between death and rebirth. And this is where most people abandon the path, not out of weakness, but because no one warned them this was coming. No one told them that after the flood of light comes stillness, disorienting, unrelenting stillness. Carl Jung called this moment the confrontation with the self, not the self that performs the ego who signs your name and collects your titles, but the deeper self, the archetypal self, the totality, the one who contains every fragment you've denied, every instinct you've banished, every truth you've been too afraid to let rise. To meet that self is to stand stripped, naked, without narrative, without merit, without spiritual posture to lean on. And in that meeting, the illusions of separation begin to dissolve. The person you've shown the world that face was never yours. And more frightening still, you do not yet know what your real face looks like. You become the outline of someone, with no story left to tell. And that is the collapse of identity, the collapse of belief, the collapse of every spiritual framework that once made you feel safe. And still, this is not the end. It is the true beginning, the start of the journey inward, the descent into the unconscious. But the unconscious does not greet you with peace. It greets you with symbols, with shadows, with images that flash like lightning in a dream. You begin to feel things you cannot name. You encounter moods that don't feel like they belong to you. Visions arrive uninvited. Meditations bleed into memories, and those memories long buried return with an unbearable clarity. You realize then, healing was never a straight line. It is a spiral, and now you are back. Not where you started, but deeper. At wounds you thought were sealed, now speaking a new language, one that no longer wants to be analyzed, only felt. This is why the emptiness feels so total, because you are not just losing the old self. You are being initiated into soul. But the soul does not arrive with clarity. It rises through grief, through longing, through aching, unresolvable loss. You mourn people who no longer speak your language. You question the values you once bled for. You sense with aching precision that you cannot go back. And yet the way forward is missed. You are no longer who you were, and not yet who you are becoming. You are caught in the silence of your own becoming. And that silence stretches. Time slows. The world dims. You are less reactive, but also less engaged. Not out of detachment, but because your nervous system is rewriting itself. You are not just unplugging from the noise. You are shedding the self you once performed, the titles, the masks, the chase for value. You stop translating your silence. You let your invisibility become sanctuary, not exile. But this invisibility, it is not exile. It is purification. You are being emptied, not erased, so that something real, may be born. And what is coming is not a better version of you. It is the true you, and truth does not arrive dressed in white robes. Truth is wild, raw, unpolished, shadowed, and whole. If this is speaking the words you haven't been able to say, like it, subscribe and stay close. This is a place for wandering minds. You thought this pain was an error, that the silence meant something had gone wrong, but it was never a mistake. It is the sacred unraveling. It is what happens when everything you built to keep yourself safe stops working. The smile becomes hollow, the food tasteless. The things you once loved echo back as faded memories of joy, already out of reach before you even realize they're gone. And even those echoes fade too. This isn't depression. This isn't apathy. This is the void. The quiet, dry void that comes after the illusions collapse. The moment when awakening doesn't gift you light, it strips you down. You are not being enlightened. You are being emptied. This is the part no one told you about. The part where the light has not yet arrived, where the beliefs dissolve, but no new belief comes to take their place, where your old life dies, but the new one has not yet been born. You stand on the ashes of your identity, hands open, heart exposed, whispering into a silence that does not reply. Who am I now? But silence does not answer, not immediately. It watches, it waits, it peels back everything that still clings. Because this is the death before rebirth, the unraveling, the sacred disintegration. And if you felt this, the dryness in your chest, the ache that doesn't point anywhere, the blankness that feels both unbearable and holy, then you are not broken, you are awakening. Carl Jung warned us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. He was not speaking in metaphor. You do not glide into awareness. You are dragged, clawing, weeping through every false story you ever told yourself just to survive. And what's left behind is not yet light. It's space, terrifying, infinite, unfamiliar, because the emptiness you feel is not a flaw. It is the place where your false self once lived. The ego, the persona, the entire structure you built to function in a world that never really saw you. That has now begun to collapse. And now you stand face to face with the void that ego was always too loud to let you feel. This void is the doorway, but it doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like nothing, like numbness, like standing in a crowded room and feeling no tether to anything. You wake up and nothing pulls. You eat and nothing stirs. The things you used to chase, pleasure, success, validation, stimulation, lose all color. Even love feels distant, unreachable. You're not disconnected from people. You're disconnected from the person you used to pretend to be. And that disconnection, though, it feels like death is sacred. You are not losing yourself. You are losing what you were never meant to hold. This emptiness is not absence. It is presence. It is the first moment your mind can no longer distract you, and your heart can no longer lie. It is the moment you are alone, truly alone, with what's real. But real is not always beautiful. You were never taught how to face yourself in silence. You were taught how to perform, how to produce, how to become someone who would be loved, not for being, but for becoming. And now awakening tears that all down. And what you're left with isn't bliss, it's grief. Realization arrives not with trumpets, but with funerals. You bury the illusion of who you thought you were. You grieve the years you spent trying to earn love through masks. You stand at the grave of a self who was never truly alive. And you begin to wonder if you ever were. The questions come, not softly but like waves. Who am I? What is this pain? Was it all a dream? Your past begins to look like a stranger's life. Your goals foreign. Your relationships misaligned. The rituals you use to hold close meaningless. You try to go back, but there is no back. And forward. You cannot see it yet. You're caught in the thickest fog, the grayest hour. Neither old nor new, neither asleep nor truly awake. And the only sound in this place is the silence of your own becoming. This silence isn't still. It stretches. It shapes your days. You move more slowly, not out of laziness, but because the world no longer pulls at your nerves the same way. You stop laughing when things aren't funny. You stop nodding when your heart says no. You begin to unplug. But it isn't peace. It's detox. Your nervous system is learning to exist without the highs and lows of external meaning. You're not just pulling away from media or people. You're pulling away from identity, from false light, from the roles that used to make you feel worthy. The achiever, the helper, the wise one, the kind one, the spiritual one. Now none of them fit, and you no longer want to be understood. You grow tired of translating your silence into words the world will recognize. You stop explaining. You stop performing. You become invisible. But invisibility is not the enemy. It is initiation. You are not being erased. You are being purified. You are being emptied so that something true can rise. But that birth will not be easy, because what's emerging is not a more evolved mask, not a new persona. What's rising is the true self. And truth does not shimmer. It does not bow. It does not fit into categories. It arrives raw, unadorned, shadowed, and real. Truth is not what you thought it would be. It does not look like enlightenment. It does not speak in affirmations. It does not make you more palatable to the world. It makes you honest, and honesty is a storm. It shakes loose everything that was built on sand. It tears apart every place where you were still pretending, even just a little. And when it does, you are left trembling. Not because you are weak, but because you are real now. You are finally here. And here is uncomfortable. Because no one claps when you stop betraying yourself. No one cheers when you no longer wear the smile they need you to wear. The world only understands what it can name. And you have no name anymore. That, too, is part of the illusion. We were trained to believe that awakening meant being special, being light, being above it all. But the real awakening, it humbles you, it undresses you. It leaves you naked in front of the mirror, whispering, "This is all that's left." And it is enough. But it doesn't feel like it. Because enoughness isn't shiny. It doesn't trend. It doesn't market well. It lives quietly in the space where the false self once ruled. And that is the truth behind the emptiness. You are not dying. You are deconstructing. The soul is not born through effort. It is born through surrender. And most people will run, because pain doesn't feel holy at first. It just hurts. They will call this numbness a failure. They will mistake the silence for regression. They will try to return to the old story just to feel something again. But you, if you are still here, still walking, still choosing not to perform, then you are not broken. You are being carved. The shadow is rising not to devour you, but to show you where your power has been hidden. And your emptiness is not the end of the road. It is the door. You begin to notice things, not outside but within. A subtle pulling like gravity drawing you inward, not toward light, but toward something deeper, something quieter. You realize the soul doesn't speak in clarity. It speaks in fragments, in moods that come without name, in dreams that leave behind feelings long after they've vanished from the mind, in images that arrive during meditation like visitors you never invited, memories you buried without ceremony, now rising fully clothed in emotion. And you begin to understand. Healing isn't a straight path. It doesn't move forward like time. It spirals. It turns inward, loops back, descends into territory you thought you'd already claimed. You revisit wounds, not because they returned, but because you have changed. You've peeled back layers, and now the wound speaks a different language. It no longer wants your analysis. It wants to be felt. The pain that once whispered now begins to sing. It does not beg to be healed. It asks to be known. And this knowing, it is not comfortable, because what's surfacing now is not new. It's ancient. It's what you hid when you first learned to hide, what you denied to survive. And when it returns not as memory, but as presence, it overwhelms you, because it is not asking to be solved. It is asking to be integrated. You are not just walking away from illusions. You are walking into yourself. And the self, the true one. The wholeness is not built from light alone. It is built from shadow, from everything that once terrified you, from everything you once ran from and now must sit beside. Carl Jung knew this. He did not speak of becoming better. He spoke of becoming whole. And wholeness requires that we make the unconscious conscious not by force, but by invitation. And now you begin to hear it, the unconscious speaking. Not in words, but in symbols. Not in logic, but in emotion. You dream of oceans. You feel like drowning. You see mirrors. You flinch. You feel moods that are not yours, but are you. And slowly, painfully, you begin to ask, if I am not the light I was chasing, then who am I? You sit in that question. You do not answer, because you cannot. Not yet. Not when the self you are becoming is still being born. You feel the old maps turning to ash. The tools you once used to fix yourself. Books, meditations, teachings. They no longer reach the place where your pain now lives, because your pain has descended into bone, and nothing can reach bone but breath, but presence. You learn to listen in a new way. You stop trying to heal. You stop trying to rise. You begin to sit with what hurts, not to solve it, just to witness it. And in that stillness, that unbearable stillness, you begin to feel something move. It's not light. It's not peace. It's presence, a trembling kind of presence, a quiet awareness that was always there but buried beneath layers of becoming. And now that awareness speaks, it says, you are here. Finally. Here. But here does not feel like home. It feels like mourning. You mourn not only what you lost, but what never truly existed. The version of yourself who was loved for performing, the dreams you chased that were never truly yours, the life you lived to be accepted, not to be real. And in that mourning, something sacred begins. Because now, you are no longer running. You are no longer resisting the fall. You are descending, willingly. And that descent into the unconscious is not an error. It is the journey, the spiral, the initiation. You begin to ask harder questions. Why did I become who I became? What did I bury to be loved? What does this pain want me to remember? These questions do not have answers, not right away, because they are not meant to be answered. They are meant to be lived, felt, held like flame, not to be extinguished, but to be honored. And so you begin to see your shadow not as the villain, but as the keeper of truth. You begin to notice your anger and realize it was your voice silenced for years. You meet your fear and realize it was your intuition ignored. You feel your grief and recognize your inner child still waiting to be seen. And slowly, painfully, tenderly, you stop judging what arises. You stop editing what you feel. You stop performing healing. You start embodying it, not because you figured it all out, but because you gave up needing to. And this is what real inner awareness looks like. Not perfection, not certainty, but presence. You sit with your sadness like it's a guest. You breathe through your anxiety like it's a messenger. You welcome your silence like it's a doorway, not a wall. And the world outside may not understand. You may look detached, unmotivated, even lost. But what they cannot see is that you are becoming, not loudly, not publicly, but deeply, truthfully, softly. You begin to realize this journey is not about light. It is about wholeness, and wholeness includes the broken, the scared, the forgotten. You no longer try to ascend. You begin to descend, fully consciously, deliberately, into the basement of the psyche, into the old rooms filled with dust and memory and silence. And there in the dim corners, you find them, versions of you that never got to speak, moments you rushed past, pain you dressed in spiritual language to make it more bearable. Now it all waits, but it does not wait with anger. It waits with patience, because the soul is not in a hurry, and now for the first time, neither are you. You no longer crave quick relief. You crave realness. You crave depth. You crave a truth that does not shimmer, but settles. You begin to let go of the impulse to fix yourself. You start asking softer questions. What parts of me have I been afraid to know? What voice inside me have I refused to trust? What if I stopped running? These are not questions for the mind. They are questions for the body, for the spirit, for the part of you that lives beneath language. And as you sit with them, with no urgency, no agenda, you begin to feel a shift. Not dramatic, not explosive, but subtle, like dawn coming through a window, a kind of re-entering. You begin to feel your body again, not as a project, but as a home. You begin to feel your emotions not as disruptions, but as language. You begin to feel your life not as something to control, but something to listen to. And in this sacred quiet, you find something you never expected: compassion for yourself, not the polished self, the honest one, the one who tried, the one who broke, the one who loved clumsily, the one who hid out of fear, not deceit. And slowly you start to understand that emptiness was never absence. It was space for this, for all of you, the light, the shadow, the still becoming. And now, finally, you begin to welcome yourself back, not as the person you were told to be, not as the person you tried to perform, but as the one who remains when all the noise falls away, the one who feels, the one who breathes, the one who stays. And this is inner awareness. It is not peace. It is not clarity. It is not knowing who you are. It is standing quietly, courageously in the truth that you do not yet know, and still choosing not to run, still choosing to stay, still choosing to become. Liberation does not come with wings. It arrives barefoot, silent, like someone who has been standing at your door for years, waiting for you to finally hear the knock beneath your thoughts. Not the thoughts that crave answers or power or progress, but the thoughts that tremble, that wonder, that ache for something they cannot name. You do not break through to freedom. You soften into it, after the emptying, after the silence, after the descent into your own shadow. You begin to notice something subtle returning. Not a version of you, but something simpler, quieter, presence. At first it feels like nothing, like standing in the ruins of everything you thought you needed. There are no trumpets, no confirmation, no one clapping for your awakening. Just you, and the breath you forgot was yours. This breath, it does not arrive with declarations. It arrives like wind moving through trees, like a feeling that doesn't belong to the mind, but to the body. You are no longer chasing meaning. You are being it. You are no longer pretending, no longer striving. You are sitting fully, finally, inside your own soul. And it feels still, not dramatic, not blissful, but honest. You wake up and the ache is still there, but it is not an enemy. It is a rhythm, a signal, a reminder that your humanity is not something to transcend, but to hold. The people around you haven't changed. The noise of the world hasn't quieted, but something inside you no longer reacts the same. The triggers lose their grip. The chaos no longer owns your breath. The stories you used to repeat about who you needed to be, who others wanted you to become, no longer feel necessary. You are not hovering above the world. You are walking through it unbound because the tether now runs inward. What once splintered you has begun to unify. This is individuation, not escape from shadow, but marriage to it. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Now you are making it conscious, not by dominating it, but by meeting it, by letting the buried become seen, by walking beside your shadow, not slaying it. Liberation is not purity. It is not perfection. It is the quiet courage to contain contradiction, to feel your anger without shame, to grieve your past without drowning in it, to look at your shadow and not flinch. You do not rise above. You fall inward, and in that falling, you remember, you were never meant to be light alone. You were meant to be whole, to carry both the storm and the sky, to become the vessel that holds paradox with grace. And now, you are. You begin to feel things again, not in overwhelm, but in openness. The morning light doesn't demand meaning. It just falls on your skin. You don't search for signs, but they come anyway. Not to instruct you, but to remind you, you are aligned, not with a belief, not with a role, but with your being. Your nervous system is no longer wired for performance. You do not need to convince anyone that you're okay. You are not pretending. You are not defending your sadness with theories. You allow it. You sit beside it like an old friend. And when joy arrives soft unannounced, you do not cling to it. You let it pass like music. You are no longer addicted to sensation. You are resting in awareness. This awareness does not fix. It does not sort. It does not organize your life into neat lessons. It simply sees, and in that seeing you soften. You laugh without needing to be understood. You cry without needing to explain. You create not for success, but for communion. You no longer chase spiritual highs. You no longer need to ascend, because you have returned to your own ground, to your own breath, to the place where nothing is missing. And that place is not a mountaintop. It is the moment you sit with your pain and do not judge it. It is the moment you hear your shadow's voice and do not interrupt. It is the moment you stand inside your own skin and do not apologize for taking up space. Liberation then is not a grand finale. It is a return to the you that was always underneath, waiting, watching, whispering through dreams and symptoms and sleepless nights, saying, "Come home." And now you are home. Not a perfect home, not a finished home, but a living one, breathing, changing, real. You begin to see others differently, not as characters in your story, but as souls walking, aching, forgetting, remembering. You listen more. You speak less. You carry a stillness that others cannot name, but they feel it. In your presence they soften too, not because you taught them, but because you allowed yourself to be real. And reality, when not performed, heals. You do not evangelize your transformation. You do not rush to share it. You protect it. Because this peace is not made of noise. It is made of silence that you earned. By sitting in your own fire. By staying in the darkness long enough to see what glows. And now that glow is yours. Not as a brightness others can see, but as a warmth you can feel. It lives in your spine, in your breath, in the way you meet your own reflection without turning away. You no longer live for the next version of you. You live for the one that's here now, even in sadness, even in confusion, even in the mundane. The sacred is no longer a peak experience. It is the way you make tea, the way you sit in grief without fixing it, the way you speak kindly to yourself in the middle of the night. You stop needing the universe to validate you. You stop asking your guides to rescue you. You stop measuring your worth in moments of clarity. You begin to live, unapologetically, unceremoniously, deeply. And in this depth, something inside you begins to root, not rise root, into body, into earth, into the present moment as it is. You are not waiting for the next sign. You are no longer searching. You are remembering. And memory in this sacred place is not of the past. It is of the soul. You remember what it feels like to trust your own heartbeat, to trust your silence, to trust the unseen rhythm of things. And with that trust comes softness, not as weakness, but as power. Because what is softer than surrender? What is stronger than truth? You begin to live without armor, not because the world is safe, but because you are, inside yourself. Finally, you can feel the wind again, not as a metaphor, but as a blessing. You can sit with someone in pain, not to fix, but to be with. You can move through uncertainty and still feel whole. You are no longer avoiding the darkness. You are walking with it, like a friend who speaks in riddles and reveals only what you're ready to hold. And now you are ready, not for certainty, not for arrival, but for presence. And that is liberation. Not the end of shadow work, not the triumph of spirit over pain, but the gentle, grounded embodiment of the soul who no longer needs to escape, who simply says, "I am here," and means it. Liberation deepens in silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence of fullness, the kind that settles into your bones like heat after the fire. It no longer burns, it warms. You stop grasping for spiritual truths, because now they live inside your breath. Not as concepts, but as knowing. You don't need to memorize mantras. Your life has become one. Every time you rest without guilt. Every time you say no without shame. Every time you feel pain without narrative. You become the chant, the prayer, the presence. Liberation is not a fixed state. It flows, sometimes with clarity, sometimes with confusion. But even in confusion, you trust. You trust the spiral. You trust the falling. You trust that you are being carried by something older than mind, because you've seen what happens when you resist, and you've tasted the grace that comes when you finally stop. You no longer argue with your past. You do not beg it to rewrite itself. You bow to it, And in that bow you find your spine again. Not straight from pride, straight from peace. And peace now is not something that happens when life is quiet. It's what remains in you even when everything else is not. Your ego once so loud, now whispers. Your soul once so buried, now sings. You walk through the same streets but with different eyes. You listen to the same voices but from a different center. Nothing outside has changed, but everything within you has. You are no longer reacting from fear. You are responding from being. This is not a shift in personality. It is a return to presence, to the part of you that never needed to prove, to the part that existed before the masks, before the noise, before the idea that you had to become anything more than this. And now you sit with that truth, not as a revelation, as a companion, like an old friend who was never gone, just waiting to be remembered. That friend is yourself, whole, complex, imperfect, sacred. And this reunion, this steady homecoming to your inner truth, this is liberation, not because you're done, but because you're finally walking beside yourself, not against. You no longer edit your feelings to be spiritual. You no longer rush your sadness to reach the light. You honor the dark. You respect the slow. You listen even when nothing seems to be speaking, because even silence now feels like love. Even stillness feels like a message. You've stopped needing answers, not because the questions disappeared, but because you no longer fear not knowing. And in this not knowing, in this sacred open space, you live. There comes a point where there is nothing left to search for. No more rituals to perfect. No more wounds to decode. No more meanings to chase through dreams and symbols. There is only this breath, this moment, this stillness. Not because the journey is over, but because the part of you that once needed to escape has grown quiet. The one who sought transformation like a destination has sat down beside you, weary, wordless, and whole. You are not a final form. You are not a solved riddle. You are presence unfolding. And that is enough. Because now you understand, healing was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering who you are beneath the forgetting. And forgetting was never failure. It was the way the soul survived. You stop holding the past like a puzzle. You stop interrogating your emotions like riddles to be solved. You begin to feel the simplicity of being human, of waking up and breathing in a body that hurts, loves, remembers, forgives, of carrying your shadow not as a burden, but as proof you did not abandon yourself to become accepted. You remember all the times you were afraid and didn't run, all the times you were silent and still listened, all the nights you broke down and became more real. This is the quiet honor of the path, not the achievements, not the visions, but the moments when no one was watching and you stayed anyway, when your heart cracked open not for show, but because something inside you chose truth over comfort. And now that truth lives in your breath. It moves in your eyes. It softens your hands when you touch the world. You do not speak it. You are it. Even when you forget, even when you fall. Because forgetting too becomes rhythm, a spiral, not backward, but inward. You understand now there is no final version of you to reach, no perfected self waiting on the horizon. There is only this returning. Again.